what hour your clock strikes. Here, it's always Halloween, and I'm always your haunted host, Luce Tomlin-Brenner. It's Always Halloween is brought to you by the Patreon Ghoul Gang, who funds the production of every episode, keeping us ad-free, independent, and sustainable. If you want to join the gang and keep this podcast growing, just visit patreon.com/itsalwayshalloween. A content warning for listeners. Today we will be discussing the C word. That's right. We do already have an It's Always parody that Pete and I made for April Fools this year. I highly recommend it for some in-depth holiday history, but today, in the spirit of Halloween, I had a lot of questions about the creepy creatures of Christmas and if any of them could be traced back to the one true holiday. This episode will get a little bloody, so if supernatural beings attacking at this time of year sends a chill down your spine, maybe pause this episode and listen in the light of a warm summer month. As it turns out, all sadistic, clawed Christmas creatures have a grudge against children. America's typically good-natured and jolly Christmas warning of, "You'll get coal in your stocking if you're not good," has clearly been watered down from a terrifying European threat of, "If you don't clean up, a witch is gonna slit open your belly and eat your guts." This punishment is the specialty of Frau Perchta, who, according to Linda Radich, the author of The Old Magic Christmas, was also known as Perchta, Bertha, Spinnstubenfrau, or the Spinning Room Lady. She's often depicted with a beaked nose, dressed in rags, carrying a cane, you know, your typical decrepit old crone. However, occasionally she appears as a young, angelic woman with pale white skin. However she appears to you, you will recognize her from her giant feet, which in some stories resemble those of geese, and they represent her endless days working the foot pedals of spinning wheels. Her webbed feet led to the belief that Perchta could shapeshift into a goose, apparently inspiring the iconic figure of Mother Goose and the tradition of eating goose on Christmas Day. Her beaked nose also has an avian connection, which according to Bone and Sickle, may be related to the figure's ancient connection to the classical Strix, a bird of ill omen, often thought of as an owl who fed on the blood and flesh of humans in the night. Perchta emerged from an amalgamation of Germanic and pre-Germanic, possibly Celtic, traditions of the Alpine regions in the early Middle Ages. She was most likely a tradition of those who lived in the countries which are today known as Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and France. She's connected to the Epiphany, or the 12th night, January 6th, the last of the 12 days of Christmas, made popular by the carol that you will now definitely have stuck in your head. Bone and Sickle writes that the name Perchta is a corruption of the word Gebrata, an old High German term for Epiphany, or Gebratanacht, which translates into Night of Shining Forth, or Night of Manifestation. If you don't have all your fibers spun by the 12th night, Frau Perchta will come for you. She could remain moderately chill and just trample or set fire to your unfinished work, but if your laziness extends to the rest of the house, she will punish you for your messy abode with ritualistic disembowelment, which includes replacing your innards with rocks, straw, and garbage. She also employs shaggy horned demons, known as Stragel or Perchten, who ride with her through the night like demented reindeer. These beasts help her execute wicked punishments, like stealing naughty children and tearing them to pieces. If you fear you can never be clean enough to escape the wrath of Perchta and her Stragel, Another option to save your stomach is setting out a bowl of porridge called Perchtenmilch. This meal should be partially consumed by your family on the 12th night. Then a portion of it is to be used as an offering to Perchta. If the porridge is gone and you're still alive the next morning, well, that's a good omen for the new year. If all your chores are completed and your house is spotless, she might even leave you a few silver coins. In some research, Perchta was said to target only women and girls because, even dating back to Celtic antiquity, housework was apparently considered a feminine duty. Yet in other readings, I noticed Perchta targeting only children. She's particularly targeting my anxieties right now because I already find holiday cleaning stressful enough without my guts on the line. If you're thinking the Strigel sound a bit like Krampus, a name derived from the German word Krampen, meaning claw, you're not wrong. Both creatures originate in the Alpine regions of Germany and Austria. You can tell them apart by their arrival date and their traveling companions. Why the Strigel come in a pack with Perchta in January? There is but one Krampus, and he typically accompanies St. Nicholas on December 5th, known as Krampus Night. The next day, December 6th, is celebrated as the Feast of St. Nicholas, or St. Nicholas Day, when children look outside their door to see if the shoe that they left out the night before contains modest treats like oranges or chocolates. Unlike Santa Claus, St. Nicholas does not deal with the bad children. Those forsaken souls must contend with Krampus, who might just give you coal and whip you with a bundle of sticks. Or, if you're really bad, he could kidnap you, drown you, and drag you to hell. If you're wondering how Krampus made his way into modern pop culture when Perchta and her Strigel have not, well, we've got the postcard industry to thank for that. There was a postcard manufacturing boom in Germany and Austria at the end of the 19th century, which led to Krampuskarten, holiday cards that depicted Krampus stuffing screaming children into his hellbound satchel, threatening them with birch stick spankings or leading them away in chains. I know what you're thinking. Krampus is kinky. Speaking of which, according to the National Geographic, some Krampus greetings in the early 20th century were purposefully titillating. Some depict him propositioning women. In others, Krampus is depicted as a large woman whipping tiny men with her birch sticks. And in one particular one that I find quite amusing, a smiling woman dangles a defeated-looking Krampus in the air, holding his bundle of birch sticks behind her back. But for most of the 20th century, this sexy devil was suppressed. The National Geographic writes, quote, "The Catholic Church forbade raucous Krampus-themed celebrations, and fascists in World War II Europe found Krampus despicable because it was considered a creation of the Social Democrats." Krampus all but disappeared until graphic designer Monty Beauchamp posted a book of Krampus vintage cards and helped organize an art show inspired by them in 2004. Since then, Austria has capitalized on Krampus's new celebrity by selling chocolates, figurines, and collectible horns, leading to locals complaining that he's lost his edge and become too commercialized. However, Eva Kreisel, a curator at the Folklife Museum in Austria, has found evidence of young people in the mid-19th century who would stand in the center of town dressed up as Krampus or St. Nicholas with the intention of getting hired to visit children at home. So making money off popular folklore or traditions is not new to modern times. While parts of Germany and Austria dread the beastly Krampus, other Germanic regions have Belsnickel, also known as Belschnickel, Pelsnickel, or Belsnigel, another frightening fur-covered creature who occasionally has a long tongue or a scary mask and doles out whips to bad children and candies and nuts to those who have been good, all throughout the month of December. In America, this tradition is preserved in Pennsylvania Dutch communities. You may have seen Dwight Schrute's take on Belsnickel on a 9th season episode of The Office, which does take place in Pennsylvania.
Oh, too much strudel. So he's kind of like Santa, except dirty.
Now let's travel to Iceland and visit another frightening Christmas witch. This one gained some traction in America thanks to an episode of The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. Gryla, the giantess, is considered to be one of the most evil figures of Icelandic folklore. According to legend, she gathers whispers about children misbehaving, and when the winter sets in, she travels about collecting them in her sack. Unlike Krampus, who merely takes the children in his sack to hell, Gryla cooks all she collects into a massive stew intended to sustain her until the following winter. Like all Creepmas Critters, Gryla has an entourage of fellow monsters with which she shares her mountain cave. My favorite is the Yule Cat, an enormous black feline with an appetite for poorly dressed children. Those who do not receive new clothes for Christmas will be preyed upon by this fashionista feline. Similar to warnings that Perchta will slit your belly if you don't finish spinning your fibers, the Yule Cat was likely created to ensure that everyone finished their weaving, knitting, and sewing before the dead of winter, the darkest time of year. Alternatively, some research says wool farmers used to invoke this legend as a way to scare workers into quickly processing the autumn wool before the holidays. Quick workers would get new clothes as gifts. Slow ones would be devoured. Gryla is also flocked by 13 Yule lads, destructive little trolls who enjoy playing pranks. Each one has their own distinct name and personality, much like Snow White's 7 dwarves and Santa's 8 little reindeer. According to the National Museum of Iceland, dozens of different names for the Yule lads appear in different folktales and stories. A popular poem about the Yule lads can be found in the 1932 book Christmas is Coming, which features the names that most Icelanders know them by today. And because I find each one of these descriptions hilarious, I will be telling you about them now. Let's start with Sheepcoat Clod. He suckles ewes in farmers' sheep sheds. Then there's Gully Gulk. He steals foam from buckets of cow milk. There's Stubby, who steals food from frying pans. Spoon Licker, who licks spoons. Pot Licker, who steals pots and licks them also. And of course, Bowl Licker, who steals bowls of food and, that's right, licks them up. Then, of course, there's Door Slammer, who stomps around and slams doors, keeping everyone in the house awake. And Yogurt Gobbler, who eats up all the Icelandic yogurt. Then, of course, Sausage Swiper, who loves to steal sausages. Window Peeper, who likes to creep outside windows and steal the stuff he sees inside. Then there's Door Sniffer, who has a huge nose and an insatiable appetite for stolen baked goods. Then Meat Hook, who snatches up any meat left out and especially loves smoked lamb. And finally, Candlebagger, who steals candles. This is definitely a bunch of annoying lads, no doubt, but dealing with them does seem favorable to being made into stew. Finally, I have saved my favorite creature for last. Let's learn about Mary Lwyd, the Welsh Christmas zombie horse. Although the origins of her name are as mysterious as the figure herself, one Welsh translation is the Grey Mare. It doesn't quite have the same pizzazz, but this does connect it to the legend of the pale horses who can cross into the underworld according to Celtic and British mythology. In an article written for Atlas Obscura, Sarah Chavez writes, This macabre skeleton mare rises from the dead and wanders the streets with her attendants, who are also fresh from the grave, to remind the living of their existence. Doesn't that call to mind the memento moris that we learned about in our chapter on skeletons? Mary Lude has lights or glass ornaments for eyes, a mane of colorful ribbons and holly, and a white sheet falls from her skull, which is attached to a pole and held by a person or two inside of it. Once under the sheet, they can control the character's mischievous nature, snapping its bony jaw or chasing after those who cross her path. Typically, those celebrating use a real horse skull, but those with weaker stomachs have been known to create a papier-mâché copy. Mary is usually flocked by a party who walks alongside of her on the dark streets at night. They travel through the neighborhoods, knocking on doors and singing this song, requesting entry from all who answer. After the first song, the homeowners answer the merry party with a set of rhyming challenges, insults, and riddles, which then goes back and forth between the two parties until their creativity dwindles. When the battle of wits winds down, the merry party is invited in and given drinks and treats. This tradition takes place during the 12 nights of Christmas, any time between Christmas Day and Epiphany. But don't get so caught up in the wassailing with Mary that you forget to complete your sewing, or you will have perchta to deal with. Have you ever celebrated any of the ghastly ghouls or traditions in today's episode? If so, I want to hear about it. Call in to the All Hallows Hotline at 802-532-DEAD or write me an eeeekmail at itsalwayshalloweenpodcast@gmail.com, and your story may be featured in an upcoming episode of Small Frights. It's Always Halloween is researched, written, and performed by me, Luce Tomlin Brenner. You can find my sources in the show notes. The editing, theme music, and sound design is by Pete Burns. Thanks, Pete. You can follow the show on Instagram at It's Always Halloween Podcast. You can follow me on all platforms at LTB Comedy and Pete on all platforms at Mittenberries. If you want more Halloween year-round, please join the Ghoul Gang by subscribing monthly or annually at patreon.com/itsalwayshalloween. You can also support the podcast by shopping our Redbubble or leaving us a donation in the tip jar. You can find those links and more in the show notes as well. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe and write us a little review so that other like-minded ghouls can find us. You can also subscribe on the NPR One app. And don't forget to tell Ira Glass you love us. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of It's Always Halloween, and come back next time, unless you get made into an Icelandic witch's stew.